Welcome back to Love Unfiltered. Today we are unpacking something that often goes unnoticed but deeply impacts relationships. Emotional labor. Emotional labor is the invisible work of managing emotions, anticipating needs, keeping the relationship running smoothly, and often being the emotional glue that holds everything together. It's not always intentional, and of course, it's not always evenly distributed. But when it's unbalanced, it can lead to burnout, resentment, and emotional exhaustion. In this episode, we'll dive into what emotional labor actually is and what it's not, how emotional labor shows up in romantic relationships, why it often falls unevenly on one partner, how emotional labor contributes to burnout and disconnection, and then finally, how couples can rebalance emotional responsibility and reconnection. This conversation isn't about blame. It's about awareness, accountability, and, of course, building healthier connections. Now, I have invited students from diverse backgrounds to share their perspectives on emotional labor, relationships, and balance. Joining me today, we have Loye, who is a senior attending the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, and she is majoring in hospitality management. Thank you for joining me this evening, Loye.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's get started.
Okay.
And for all my guest speakers, of course, there is a question pinned in the chat that you guys can answer in the chat if you would like. But that question is, how do you notice emotional labor showing up in your relationship? All right. I want to see what all the little answers we got going. All right. Let's get started. Now, before we can address emotional labor, we need to clearly define it. Emotional labor in relationships can look like managing both partners' emotions, remembering important dates, plans, and responsibilities, initiating difficult conversations, being the primary communicator, checking in emotionally while neglecting your own needs, regulating conflict to keep the peace, anticipating a partner's needs before they express them, and then finally, carrying the mental load of the relationship. What emotional labor is not: simply being caring, supporting each other during hard times, and occasional emotional effort from both partners. Emotional labor becomes a problem when it's constant, unrecognized, and one-sided. Now, how it impacts the partner carrying it: emotional exhaustion, feeling unseen or unappreciated, burnout, resentment, loss of emotional intimacy, and feeling more like a caretaker than a partner. Now, for my guest speaker, when did you first realize emotional labor was a real thing in relationships?
I would say I realized emotional labor was a real thing when I saw the shift of the roles. So you know how some people say the woman has this role and a man has this role. Mm-hmm. When you really look at it, in the olden days, a lot of that emotional labor was always put on the woman, mm-hmm. and not so much the, even if they were in a healthy or a non-healthy relationship. Mm-hmm. I think that it started to really become an issue, not an issue, but something that people needed to recognize once we started in this generation, because seeing the different dynamics of how a woman's role is and a man's role is, and how it can kind of like change up, and or you can help me in this role and I can help you in that role, in different ways. How I kind of saw it, changing up. So like even a lot of times where there be like a marriage where the man is at home and the woman's at work, different types of things to see that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay. Why do you think emotional labor often goes unnoticed?
I believe that it goes unnoticed from like my perspective, since I do date men. From my perspective, I think a lot of times it's like male centered. I think a lot of it is male centered, and because of that, they tend to, so they tend to not realize that they're not doing anything, and that the woman is always kind of doing the emotional labor. I think that like if maybe they're taught in a different way that like, hey, this is what you would also need to be helping out with and things like that, it would be a little bit better. And maybe if you do get in a situation like that, you can help and teach them like what that looks like. But I think a lot of it goes back to like male-centered areas where like men weren't taught to do that. They were taught to do what a man is supposed to do, and men are illogical than emotional. And since they're logical, they don't really have time for emotions. So therefore, they don't really do emotional labor because they weren't taught how to.
I agree. I definitely do think that emotional labor could go on unnoticed when on like the guy's side, because a lot of guys in our generation are raised by parents who instill this like thing where they're like, don't be emotional, and then guys end up being more logical, so they can't really understand their significant others from like an emotional standpoint. But you have a lot of guys out there who are more in tune with their emotional side. So you have those ones as well.
Exactly. I think that I think for a guy, when they are not in tune with their emotional side and only in tune with their logic side, I think it becomes like kind of like a war in their head, where it's like they're not dealing with that emotional side because stuff happens. Men have emotions, people pass, things happen. And because they're not dealing with that emotions, it just kind of balls up. And if they're not taught now or later how to handle that, I think it can become a really big problem. In my experience, it's always kind of the ladies who are more emotional. Like me personally, I know I'm emotional. You know what I mean? So, I know.
Repeat that again.
Okay. What was the question again?
Oh, why do you think emotional labor often goes unnoticed?
Oh, I think it goes unnoticed because, I think a lot of people don't realize what emotional labor looks like. Like for men or women, unless you are like an emotional person at hand or understand emotions or have been taught that, you're not going to fully understand what emotional labor looks like. I think like a lot of, like, especially for me, I was very much a people pleaser. So that comes in like, I need to please people. I need to hold space for them. I need to be emotionally there for them. And forgetting my own, So being there for other people, but not being there for myself, or being friends with people who I'm always there for them, but they're never here for me, and not saying like, hey, I need you to be there for me. So I think that's kind of how it comes unlooked. Did I answer the question?
Yes.
Okay, but.
And then for the last question, how can emotional labor quietly create resentment?
I think it could create resentment. Like, you feel like you're doing all the work, You're remembering this, you're caring for them, you're being sensitive to their feelings, you're remembering things that they like. But then when it comes to them and you ask them like a certain question, like the things you like, and they don't remember, I think you could be resentful for that, because it's like you're doing all this work and they seem like they're not doing anything. And a lot of times it's like, and it's so funny. I was talking to my grandma about this, about how, like, especially with like men, from my experience, you have to like teach them that, because if you don't, they won't know, you know. But I could also see how you can resent them for it, because it's like you're not doing anything. So it makes you feel like you're the only one doing all this work to keep the relationship up, when in all honesty they probably don't know, and or least case they don't want to. So.
Mm-hmm. Emotional labor doesn't fall unevenly by accident. It's shaped by socialization, expectations, and communication patterns. Common reasons emotional labor becomes one-sided are gender roles and societal conditioning, which we mentioned, one partner being more emotionally expressive, which we also mentioned, avoidance of conflict by one partner, you're better at it becoming the default, fear, fear of emotional discomfort, and then lack of awareness, not lack of care. Often, the partner benefiting from emotional labor doesn't realize how much is being carried behind the scenes. Now, signs that emotional labor is imbalanced: one partner always initiates conversations, one partner manages conflict resolution, one partner tracks emotional well-being, and one partner feels responsible for the relationship's success. Now, Laurier, why do you think emotional responsibility often falls on one person?
I think in a non-healthy relationship, friendship or relationship, I think it often happens that way, because either, as you said, like, someone's not aware, and or I feel like the other side doesn't communicate, So, like, going back to like attachment, the episode we were talking about, I feel like some people, depend on like like a lot of anxious attachments. I know that's what I had. I kind of felt like if I didn't do all this work, it won't last. If I don't do all this work, this friendship won't last. If I don't do all this work, this relationship won't last. We'll kind of get in that mindset where it's like, I have to do this, or I'm going to do this because I want this to work so badly. And I think that, my bad. Can you ask me the question one more time?
Why do you think emotional responsibility often falls on one person?
Oh, yeah. So back to what I was saying. So, like, I think a lot of people are just too worried about making it last and making it fit and making it work, when in all honesty it's probably not working because it's probably not meant to be. They probably don't know, and or it's probably a toxic situation. I've noticed that in a lot of toxic situations, they just kind of one side kind of loves more or harder than the other side, so then you end up in this toxic situation. So I think that's it.
How can unspoken expectations make emotional labor worse?
I think unspoken expectations can make it worse, because you're expecting someone to know how to do it, to want to do it. And that's not always the best, especially if you don't ask, I think that in a healthier relationship or friendship, y'all will talk about it before, one person handles it. But I also think that, like, the person who is feeling this way should probably speak up,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if you don't make space for yourself, nobody will.
Right.
Yeah.
I think unspoken expectations can make emotional labor worse when there's like just no communication. And I have stated this multiple times in many episodes that healthy communication is very important for any relationship, whether it's platonic or romantic. You have to communicate everything, and you have to be truthful and honest too. Um, if you have unspoken expectations on your partner and you just didn't tell them that you have those expectations, how are you supposed to know? You know?
Exactly.
When they do something, you're like, oh, I expected you not to do that. They're like, well, hey, I didn't know I couldn't do that, or I didn't know you expected me to do this. And, you gotta talk about those type of things with people. That's what I think.
Exactly. I think it becomes hard when people don't know how to communicate,
Mm-hmm.
Or you're just in a toxic situation. So, like, you could deal with people who just don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I can really see that.
And then for the final question, um, what role does communication play in this imbalance? Um, I kind of went a little bit into that. Um, well, like I said, communication is important. You want to make sure that nothing goes unsaid and everything's understood. You want to like avoid all types of misunderstandings as best as you can.
Exactly. I also think that communication is definitely key in this type of situation, but I also think, like, hearing and really listening to your partner is also important, because what if they are trying to communicate but they don't know how to,
Mm-hmm.
That's when you really kind of play, like, you really kind of got to figure it out,
Mm-hmm.
And as you get to know them, you'll probably be able to see the signs, and things like that. But I think communication is a very big part of it, because people can get overwhelmed, And sometimes some people don't say that they're overwhelmed because they don't know exactly what that. I should say they don't know what it feels like, but they don't know how to detect it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, learning your partner and also listening to your partner when they say something is very important
Mm-hmm.
to know.
Now, when emotional labor goes unaddressed, burnout isn't a possibility. It is guaranteed. Signs of emotional burnout are feeling emotionally numb, irritability, pulling away from intimacy, feeling disconnected from your partner, fantasizing about being alone for peace, and then finally, feeling guilty for needing rest. Burnout doesn't mean you don't love your partner. It means you've been carrying too much for too long. Now, how emotional burnout can affect the relationship, it can increase conflict, create emotional distance, reduce the intimacy between you and your partner, break down in communication, and then one partner feeling abandoned, the other overwhelmed. Now, Loye, why do people often feel guilty for feeling burned out?
Why do people feel guilty for feeling burned out? I think a lot of it could be because I feel like they're anxious. I feel like they think that if they become burned out, that they'll lose that person.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they're too worried about losing that person than actually, like, loving them and getting to know them for who they are right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Yeah, that's my answer.
How can burnout be mistaken for falling out of love?
Ooh, because it looks the same.
Mm-hmm.
Because it looks the same if you don't catch it early enough.
It definitely could look the same. Like, you feel like falling out of love with somebody, you don't feel attracted to them, you feel tired all the time when you're around them, you don't even feel good when you're around them.
You don't even want to hang out with them as often as you used to.
Right.
The second part gets less. I think there's definitely signs. But I think that, like, a lot of people, when they start to see those signs, they think that they're falling out of love. But you won't know if that's the case unless you communicate.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And it's an easy fix, too.
exactly. And you never want to assume. Like, that was the one thing I had to, like, personally had to figure out for myself. It's like, I don't want to assume. So I have to ask before I make a decision or make a thought or, an answer. I had to ask.
Now, what happens when emotional labor goes unacknowledged for too long?
You can really fall out of love with someone. It can burn. It will burn. I think eventually it will turn into, falling out of love for them. So.
Balance starts with awareness and continues with action. Healthy ways to rebalance emotional labor: you can acknowledge emotional effort openly. Have honest conversations about emotional needs. Share responsibility for communication and planning. Ask instead of assuming. Take initiative. What are you about to say?
Can I say it, or should I let you finish?
Oh yeah, you can say it.
Okay, I would say the other thing is, like, also learning your partner, like knowing when their social batteries are low, or just knowing when their batteries are low in general. Socializing, overwhelming. I like those little emojis where the batteries are. Like, even if you get to the point where you just have to communicate with a social battery and send them a picture of, this is where I'm at right now, and it's 10%. Knowing that, and then being helpful and willing to be helpful when they're not at their a full 100% is also the best way to communicate too.
I think that's a good idea. A good method that you could use. You want to take initiative without being asked, and then validate your partner's emotional work. Now, what healthy emotional partnership looks like: shared responsibility, mutual check-ins, emotional accountability, appreciation and recognition, and the willingness to grow together. Rebalancing emotional labor isn't about keeping score. It's about building equity. Now, Loye, and also my listeners, what's one way partners can show appreciation for emotional labor?
Gift giving. Gift giving. I say gift giving. I compliment. Telling your partner that you're doing a good job. Rewards. It doesn't have to be like, actual gifts. It could be comments. It could be helping out. Maybe, like, if you see it, do it. My mom always kind of tells me that if you see the dishes, wash the dishes. Right. If you know you have to do it, do it.
Or just simply telling them you appreciate them.
Exactly.
Or give them a massage too. That can help.
Exactly. You might get lucky.
Right. How can couples talk about emotional labor without turning it into a fight?
I think couples. Okay, so what I was taught personally, right, from like my family and the woman, in my family is when you're talking to the person that you love, man or woman, you kind of have to talk direct but soft, and you have to like make sure your tone is soft but understanding. So soft and direct, low, regular value, and make sure like, because like a lot of times, like if you're screaming at people, they're not going to get it. All they're going to get is that you're screaming at them. You know what I mean? They're not going to get what you're actually saying. If you're talking to them regularly in a soft tone, very, very soft, very normal tone, very to the point, but still saying the point, like what you're trying to say to them, it comes off better. It comes off as, oh, she's trying to talk to me. She's not fussing at me. She's trying to talk to me. And also, I believe like the different words that you use, and maybe like even in the middle of you explaining, take a moment to really think about the words that are coming out your mouth, because you don't want to disrespect them in the process. You want to try to communicate the best way you can, you know? So just taking your time and saying what you need to say, if that's you needing to write it out, or, you know, take your time when you're saying it, whatever it looks like for you.
And then finally, what does emotional partnership look like to you?
Emotional partnership to me is kind of like me and the person taking on each other's roles in a way. So like, yeah, like if he goes out and works, right, and I stay home with the kids, personally for me, I would have like a side job, something like small to still make money, so I still feel like I'm, you know, doing something, you know. And or, you know, if he comes home and he wants to like wash dishes or handle the workplace or take the kids somewhere, things like that. So kind of like taking on each other's roles in some ways if you have the time and if you can, and or if you see your person, you know, kind of getting tired or overwhelmed with the situation.
I agree. All right. Well, today we unpacked what emotional labor really is, how it shows up invisibly in relationships, and how carrying too much emotional responsibility can lead to burnout and disconnection. We learned that emotional labor thrives in silence, but balance grows through communication and shared effort. Now, for my listeners and for my guest speaker, needing rest doesn't make you selfish. Wanting emotional support doesn't make you needy. And recognizing imbalance doesn't mean your relationship is failing. It means the relationship is ready to grow. Healthy love is shared, not shouldered alone. Now, for Wednesday, we will dive into the intersection of mental health and sexual wellness. We'll explore how mental health and sexual well-being are connected, how struggles in one area can impact the other, and ways to cultivate healthy, shame-free intimacy. You guys do not want to miss it. And of course, we'd love to hear from you. Send in your personal stories, questions, or thoughts about mental health and relationships for future episodes. You can send all of these to my Instagram, loveunfiltered.podcast. Your experiences help guide these important conversations. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends and family. Sharing this episode could help someone feel seen or start a meaningful conversation. Here's to love, self-care, and the courage to grow together. No matter where you are in your journey, remember that you are not alone. Take care of your heart, your partner, and your peace. See you all on Wednesday. Bye!